What's up, everybody? This is Paul from Boosted Films, and today we're going to change the cabin air filters on a 2011 Nissan Armada. This entire procedure is fairly simple, and what we're going to be doing is removing our glove box, and that's where our cabin air filters are located. And before we jump into the full how-to of this, I'm just going to let you know some tools you will need. You'll need a Phillips screwdriver and a regular or flathead style screwdriver. And then you'll also need an 8mm socket, or possibly even a wrench would work. In this case, you can see I had a fairly long extension, probably about 6 or 8 inch extension with this 8mm socket. And we're going to start on the passenger side of the vehicle, and we're going to open up the passenger side door. And what we really need to do here is remove this glove box that's on the passenger side. There's a couple screws mainly holding this in place, and I'm going to show you a few of them now. So at the bottom part of the glove box, there's a screw on both sides, a screw on the left side and a screw on the right side. Both those are Phillips screws that'll have to be removed. And then in the middle portion, there are some clips that kind of pop out with just a simple flathead screwdriver. So we're going to walk through this process first. Of course, the Phillips screws should just unscrew fairly easily. So you're going to remove each of those 2 Phillips screws. And then when it comes to these inner plastic clips, and a flathead screwdriver should be able to get in, and then just with a little twist of the screwdriver, you should be able to get that centerpiece out, and that kind of loosens the whole clip. So then you can pull out that clip after you get that centerpiece pulled out. Next, we're going to move to the top part of the glove box, and there are 3 Phillips screws up here that we're going to remove. And these are the 3 main remaining parts that are holding this glove box in place. So again, one by one, we're going to remove these Phillips screws with our Phillips screwdriver. Now you need to use a little bit of force to pull this glove box out, but it should be removable once you have those screws all removed. And what's holding it in now is kind of a couple of plastic clips, if you will, plastic pieces that just push in and pull out with a little force. So I'm going to stick my hand up in here a little bit and pull, where the glove box opens and closes. I put my hand up in there and had a pretty good spot to pull out. So I did that on both sides. But then I'm also going to show you on the right side where the passenger door most part is. I'm going to show you over there where there's kind of this rubber seal that also helps hold it in place. So you got to end up pulling this part down past the rubber seal as well. There's also some clips up in there that need to align when you put it back in, but we'll worry about that when we get to reinstalling. But a little bit of force, just kind of pull it out of those other extra places that it pushes in place, and you should be able to pull it out. So now we're going underneath the dash, and we're going to show you right here where your cabin air filters are. You can see the screw I'm pointing to right here is the one screw we're going to have to remove, and that's why you needed your 8mm socket, or again, possibly wrench. You could get in there with a wrench, but it probably would be a little harder to do. So I recommend, if you have a socket, this is a 1/4 inch ratchet, and again, probably a 6 or 8 inch long extension, and then you could use a socket, 8mm socket. It could be a deep or shallow well, and by that I mean how long or short it is, basically. So this is a shorter, shallow socket that I'm currently using, but you could use a deeper one as well. So 8mm for that. And you should be able to unscrew that and then pull out that screw, set it aside, because of course you'll need it later. And then this door that covers the cabin air filters kind of just lifts up and off. You'll see in a little bit here that there's some kind of hinges it sets on top. There's 3 different spots. So we just kind of need to lift it up and then pull it towards us to get it out. You just kind of have to be careful with that wire. There's a bunch of wire right in front of this, which is also why I think there's 2 separate filters. You're going to see in a second. It's kind of split. This is one main filter, but it's split into 2. And I think it's just to make this easier to do, which is actually very nice. So I used my screwdriver here, pushed it underneath this cabin air filter, and pulled it out. If you got some better fingernails than me, you might be able to pull it out with your fingers. But as you can see this already, you can actually see that this is kind of dirty. So we're going to pop this wire out of the way and pull this air filter out. Now, just so you're aware, the cabin airflow direction is down. That's the way the air flows through, and you can see the top is so dirty. That's also a hint to let you know that this cabin, the way the airflow works is because it's dirtiest on top. That means the airflow is flowing from the top to the bottom. So we're just going to slide over this second air filter. There's 2 identical air filters in here, basically, and again, I think they split them up just to make this job a bit easier. So now we're going to pull out the second one as well. And as you can see, these are pretty dirty. They may have been changed before. Who knows? So if you haven't checked yours, I'd go ahead and check them. And hopefully you can follow this how-to to see how to do it yourself. So here's our new cabin air filter here. And what I always like to do is just pull these out and make a comparison to the one you removed. Check the new ones versus the old ones, just to make sure they look similar proportions, make sure they're about the same width, height, depth, all that kind of stuff, so you're not struggling to do anything when you put them back in. Also noting here that it does say the airflow direction on these new ones. Be careful when you get these if you didn't get this exact brand. Sometimes they just have an arrow on them. An arrow on them doesn't always mean airflow direction, so watch for that. And again, airflow direction will be down with this. And these particular cabin air filters do say airflow direction down. So we got our first new air filter that we're gonna slide in place here. As far as I could tell, it didn't matter anything else other than the airflow direction. So you should be able to just slide in the first one. You'll slide it in, you'll push it in, and then you'll actually slide it off to the right side, again, just to make room for your second one. So they should slide in fairly easily. If there's any other extra kind of debris around there, if yours were really dirty, maybe try to take a vacuum and clean up any of that debris before you put the new ones in. But again, it should be a pretty simple process. Just slide it in and then slide over to the right. I'll utilize the screwdriver again to help push this over because I couldn't obviously reach all the way towards the back. But if you have a longer screwdriver, you can push it in just to help assist the back part of this cabin air filter over to the right side. And what that's going to do is create room for the second part of this air filter. So again, putting this other piece of the air filter in, we're going to check and make sure our airflow directions are pointed down. And then we're going to slide in this second part of the cabin air filter. It should slide in fairly easy again. You may have to wiggle up and down a little bit or something just to push it in, but it shouldn't require a lot of force. And of course, it should be going in pretty parallel to the ground here. And there you go. You actually have already now changed the cabin air filters, but of course you want to reinstall that cover that you took off. So noting the 3 spots at the top where it kind of hooks on, we're going to slide this up basically towards the cabin air filters we just put in, and then slide it over behind this wiring harness. There's kind of that wiring harness in the way of all this, so you got to work around that a little bit. So we're going to slide it behind that, and then we're going to lift it up to make sure it's above those hinges that it holds on the very top. And then slide it down, pull it down a little bit, and it should pull in place. And from my experience, it kind of was a little looser at the bottom. It kind of would flap a little bit at the bottom, but I believe that's the way it should be. And of course, once you put that screw back in place, it's really just holding it in place like it should be. But you can, of course, just double check, take a look up top. It should be easier to see up there almost than it is for me to show because it's kind of tough to get in there with the camera. But double check that and make sure all 3 of those spots are holding in place up top. And then take your screw. And I recommend starting it with your fingers first, just to make sure you don't miss cross thread or anything like that. You should be able to easily get it started with your fingers either way. Try to make sure it's flat and not crooked in any way and get it started. And then you should be able to utilize your ratchet or wrench, whatever you use to remove it. Of course, you'd be doing the same thing here, but just tightening it up this time and tighten up that screw. Now, of course, we want to reinstall our glove box and get that back in place. So we're going to bring that back into the car here, and we're going to lift it up. I'm going to start by holding the bottom piece kind of against the dash first. And I'm going to show you here in a second, I'll point out a few spots that you should really watch for. One mainly being the lower right-hand part. You can kind of see where it needs to slide in. It's a little, I don't know how else to better say it, but it needs to kind of just slide up right in place where it kind of would go against this metal piece here, as you can see. So try to make sure you get that right in place. The left side doesn't quite work the same way. It's a little bit easier to actually line up. So, but watch for that lower right side. Hold there and lift it up in place. And then the next thing you're going to want to pay attention to is the right side where this rubber stuff is that the glove box is going to have to go behind. So you're going to have to push it behind this rubber seal around the door seal here. And also note the upper right as well, you can see where there's this little slot, this little almost V slot that this is going to have to slide into. Make sure you get that lined up as well. There's a couple other spots that are not the same as that exactly, but there's other spots that you kind of want to make sure that you get this to push back in place, and there's holes that basically line up for that so you can push it in. And now you can see I actually did pretty much push this right in place, and it is held up a little bit. But before I put it all the way in, again, I want to point out now on the left side, the top left side of the glove box here, we're looking at the black part is kind of the hole where you would push the glove box piece into. So there's a piece you got to line up and then push in. So that's part of what held this in place when there were no screws actually holding this in. So watch for anything like that when you push your glove box back in place. So if it seems like you're really pushing on it and it's not like popping in place, that probably means you got to pull it back off and kind of check, make sure none of those plastic pieces on the glove box are bent or anything like that. You shouldn't have to use a whole lot of force to push this back in place. Now we're back to the bottom side of the glove box. So we're going to put those screws in back on the bottom. Again, one on the right and one on the left, Phillips screws. So we're going to go ahead and screw those in place and tighten them up. And then when it comes to the center plastic clips, realistically, those should just snap in place as long as the center piece of the clip is still pulled out. You just push those right in place and then push that center piece in, and that kind of expands the wings, if you will, when it's inside, and then holds it in place. Kind of neat and easy setup when they work like they should. We're almost done. Now all we really need to do is tighten up those top 3 screws holding this glove box in place. So we're going to go ahead and start those screws and screw them all in. And that is really the last part of this job. You should be able to open and close your glove box with ease. If for some reason it doesn't seem like it's opening and closing properly, you might want to pull it back off and double check. But that's about it. You close your door and you are done. So that's it, everybody. I appreciate you watching this video. But of course, I am just a guy on YouTube that likes to document things I do. So I may have done something wrong, or you may know of a better way to do something. So please check the comments in the comment section. And if there is anything very pertinent that needs to be redone, I will pin a comment, or you can check the video description for any updates there. And also, please, if you can, let me know if this worked for you for a similar year Nissan Armada. I'm not sure what years would work being the same. But if you comment in the comment section and let us know what works, that could be valuable to everyone in the community that might be watching this video, wanting to know if it works for their particular year of Nissan Armada. But as always, this is Paul from Boosted Films, and thanks so much for watching.